Do you want to learn how you can set up a Lambda to automatically resize any images that get uploaded to your S3 buckets? In this video, that is exactly what I'm going to teach you how to do. Hi guys, my name is Sam with Complete Coding, where our aim is to make you into the best developer that you can be. In this video, we're going to be looking at how we can implement a Lambda, which listens for images that get uploaded to our S3 bucket. And when that happens, it gets that image, resizes it, and uploads it back to the bucket. This can be really useful for when you need to make a profile picture in your web page, or you don't want to have to serve those very large files every single time. So what we're going to do now is jump into the code and see how we can do all of this. Now that we're in the code, we can start making the changes we need to allow us to resize images that get uploaded to our S3 bucket. The first thing that we need to do is go into our S3 common file, and we're going to be changing our write function a little bit to add some extra functionality that we're going to need in this video. The first thing we need to do is add some extra parameters. Those parameters are an ACL, which is your access control list, which is going to tell S3 who is allowed to access the file that we are uploading. And the second one is a content type. And what we can do is we can attach both of these to our parameters. So your ACL as well as your content type. The last thing that we need to update in this file is the fact that at the moment we are always trying to stringify the data, because at the time we assumed that the data was going to be JSON. In this video, we're going to be uploading a buffer as well, so this isn't going to work. What we can do here is we can actually check if the data is a buffer, and if it is, keep it as is, else we can stringify it because it will probably be JSON. So here we can test it by saying buffer.isBuffer and pass in the data. Use a ternary equation, so if it is a buffer, then we just want to set body to be the data, else we want to stringify it just like that. If we save this file, then that is everything we need to do in this file completed. We can now head over to our image upload.js, where we need to make a small change. In the last video that we did where we created this API, when we uploaded a file or an image, it ended up in the root of the bucket, which is fine. But in this video, we want to separate it out slightly. We want it so that if you upload a new image, it gets put into a specific folder within that bucket. That way we can have an originals or an uploads folder, and then we can have a resized folder as well, but both in the same bucket. To do that, it is really simple. We just need to go to our key, and at the start of it, just add uploads/name.extension. If we save that, now any file that gets uploaded will end up in the uploads folder within our bucket. Now we can get on to the real meat of this video, which is creating a new file in our endpoints called image resize.js and creating a Lambda which allows us to resize any image that gets uploaded to an S3 bucket. This is going to start pretty much the same as most APIs, or most Lambdas should I say, with an exports.js handler, and this is going to be async, and it's going to take an event as normal. Now the difference here is the event that we're getting passed here isn't an API gateway event, it is an S3 data change event. And that is slightly different. That has records on it, and those records are any file that has been changed, which has triggered our Lambda. So we can get those by saying records are going to be destructured off the event. And with these records, we can then do the logic needed to get it and resize it. This logic can be a little bit complicated, so what we're going to do is we're going to wrap this all in a try-catch. And to start with, we're going to deal with the error. So if there's an error, just simply console.log the error in try-catch with the error, just like that. And then we're going to return responses._400, and we can import that. So import responses from /common/API responses. Now that we've got that, we can go into our try-catch, and we're going to map over all of the records. So records.map, and in here we can say that record, for each of those records, we need to get some data from it. So const bucket equals record.s3.bucket.name. As well as that, we can get the file. So const file equals record.s3.object.key. And then what we can do is return resize image, which is a function we're going to create. Inside this, we can pass up an object which has the bucket name, where the file is located, the file name, which is what we're going to need to find the file, and then a width and a height. So the width and the height are going to be parameters which define how big we make this new file after it has been resized. So const width equals, let's go with 300, and const height is also going to be 300. This is going to be good because it's going to make our image fit within a 300 by 300 sized box, but keep the aspect ratio the same. Now, this resized image is actually going to be an async function. So that means it's going to return a promise. So this records.map is going to return an array of promises. So const prom array equals records.map. And then we need to check that all of those promises succeed. So we can await promise.all prom array, like that, and then return a 200. So responses dot underscore 200, just like that. So if any of these image resizing fails, this promise all is going to fail and it's going to go into our catch. But if they all succeed, we're going to get a 200 response sent back to S3. Now what we can do is copy this resized image and actually create this function. So in here, what we can do is we can say const resize image equals an async function that takes, and I'm going to copy the parameters that we've passed in at the top, just like that. Obviously this is a function, and in here we've got a couple of things we need to do. The first thing we need to do is get the image from the existing S3 uploads file. We need to then convert it into something that we can resize. We need to resize it, write it back to S3, and then that is us done. So the first thing is getting it from S3. So const image buffer, and that is going to equal await, and S3 dot get, and that get needs a file and it needs a bucket. So we need to import this S3 from our S3 common folder. So import S3 from /common/S3, just like that. And now we know that this image buffer is a promised result of S3 get object output. So now we need to do a conversion to convert it into a system that we can resize. With Node, there is a really cool package called GIMP, which is a JavaScript-only image processing library. We can go into our terminal and run npm install --save JIMP, just like that, which will install this new package, which allows us to resize and do things with our image. There's a load of other features we can do with GIMP, such as changing colors and doing some really interesting things, but for now we're going to stick with the resizing. We can go to the top of our file and import GIMP from GIMP, just like that. We can then go down to our resize image and say const GIMP image equals an await, because this read is going to be async, GIMP.read, and then we're going to be reading image buffer dot body, just like that. So this is now going to be a GIMP version of the image that has been uploaded to that bucket and that file. GIMP has a couple of nice little utilities, and one thing we're going to need at some point is the MIME type, which is whether it's .jpg, .png, etc. So we can say that const MIME equals GIMP image dot get MIME, just like that, and that will return our MIME type. As well as that, we then need to resize our image. So we're going to create the resized image buffer, and again this is going to be async, so await GIMP image, and then GIMP has a couple of different methods, as you can see here, and the one we're going to go with is scale to fit, which takes a width and a height and says I'm going to rescale the image you've provided. I'm going to keep the aspect ratio the same, but make sure that it fits within the width and the height you've provided. This does mean that if you've got a really wide and short image, or a really tall and thin image, it can end up quite small. But if you've got a square aspect ratio image, it will end up scaled really nicely. But in any case, you know exactly what the bounding box for that image is going to be. Now that we've scaled it, we need to convert it into a buffer. So we can use .get buffer async, and we need to pass the MIME into that, which allows us to write it back to S3. When we're writing it back to S3, we need to do a little bit of logic first to work out what the key for this new resized image is going to be. When we have this file that is passed in, that is going to be the file name of the uploaded file. So that's going to be something like uploads/myprofilepicture.png. And we only really care about the myprofilepicture.png. So we need to split that out. So we can say that const short file name equals file.split. We're going to be splitting on a slash and taking the second part, which is at index 1. Now that we've got the short file name, we can say that we have a new file name, and we're going to use backtick strings and say that it's going to be uploaded to resized /, and in here I'm actually going to use variables so that we can have a different folder for each width and height. And doing this is going to mean that you get a really nice folder structure if you do decide to vary these things. Finally, we want to actually attach the original file name, but just the short part, just like that, and we'll have a new file. This is really good because, in theory, instead of calling this once in here, you could call it 4 different times with different widths and heights, and each time it's going to resave the resized image to a folder that is going to be defined by the width and the height. This means you could, in theory, make an API call that uploads an image, and then when this gets triggered, it creates a small, medium, and large version of that image, which you could then use inside your web app for different applications. So now that we've got this new file name, we need to write it back to S3. So this is why we made that change right at the start, allowing us to upload a buffer, but also define the ACL. So here we can say await s3.write. This takes the data, which is going to be the resized image buffer. It then takes a file name, which is going to be the new file name, the bucket, and then here an access control list, which is going to be public-read, which allows any of the public to read the image but not write or edit it. And finally a content type of MIME. At the end of all this, we're going to return new file name and save that. So that is all of the code that we need to resize an image. And in our case, we're going to be resizing it to 300 by 300 at a maximum and saving it into our resized 300 by 300, then the file name. The last thing to do is to go into our serverless YAML file again, scroll down to our functions and to the end of those. And in here, we need to create a new Lambda function. This is going to be called image resize. It's going to have a handler of lambdas / endpoints / image resize dot handler, and make sure that that image resize there is exactly the same as your file name in the endpoints directory. As well as a handler, we need the events that are going to trigger it. And unlike all of our other APIs, well, because this isn't an API, we don't need HTTP. Instead, we need to say that this is triggered via S3. And when something is triggered via S3, it takes some different parameters. Those parameters are a bucket, which is the bucket that it should be listening to trigger this Lambda. For us, we're going to use our image upload bucket, which we can reference using self:/custom.imageUploadBucket. As well as that, you can define what are different types of event this trigger is listening for. You can have S3 reads, writes, updates, deletes, but in our case, we're listening for the creation of a new file. So that is S3 : object created : star. As well as that, you can define even more rules to limit the things that trigger this. So we can actually add some rules, and our rules can be anything. And in our case, we want to say that we only want to trigger this if the file has a file prefix of uploads. So prefix has to be uploads /. And what this is going to do is it's going to make sure that it only runs once. If we didn't add this, we'd upload our file, our new image resizer would create a new image inside this bucket, which would then re-trigger our resize and would then loop back over. The last thing we need to do is add an existing flag and set that to true. And that just means that we know that this S3 bucket already exists, so we don't need to create a new one. We can now go into our terminal and run SLS deploy, and this will now deploy our new image resize Lambda and set that all up. Whilst this is building, I just want to point out that only 13.5% of you guys are currently subscribed. The best way to help out this channel is to make sure that you subscribe, and it also means you stay up to date with all of the latest serverless things. So now that has finished deploying, we can scroll up and we get our original image upload URL, which we're going to need to use our image upload React app that we made in a previous video. Inside our functions, we can see that we also have that image resize Lambda, which is going to process any of the images that we upload now. So if we go over into our React app, what we can do is we can paste in the image upload URL, choose an image, and then select an image. As you can see here, this is an 800 by 532. And when we upload that, that is the size of the file that we are showing here and that we have uploaded. We can now go into our AWS account and go into an S3. And in here, we're looking for the bucket which we used for image upload. So if you search for the image upload bucket, or if you don't know what it is, go back into your serverless YAML, and you should have an image upload bucket, so you could copy that as well. So we've now got that bucket, and we have an uploads folder, and we can see that if we order this by last modified, at 10:25, which is now, we uploaded this image. But that image is going to be at full size, which is 82 kilobytes. If we go back into the root of the bucket, go to Resized, here we have a folder called 300 by 300. And in here, we also have that same record, but it is now 76 kilobytes. If we open up this image, we can see that it is. If you were to download this file, you'd be able to inspect on it and actually see that the file size is much smaller than the original. This is now 300 wide I believe it's 200 high, which means our image has been resized, which means if you wanted to use this as a thumbnail on an article or if it was a profile picture, then you wouldn't be downloading all of that extra data for the full-sized image. In this video, we have learned how we can implement a Lambda function that listens to our existing S3 bucket, and anytime someone uploads an image, it takes that image, resizes it using GIMP, and then saves it to a new folder in that same bucket. This has loads of applications, from creating a consistently sized profile picture to allowing customers to view a small thumbnail before seeing the full-sized image, and all of this can optimize the experience for your customers. If you've learned something new in this video, it really helped me if you hit that like button, as it helps the YouTube algorithm suggest it to more developers just like yourselves. And if you haven't done already, make sure to subscribe down here so you don't miss out on the next video I'm going to release on serverless development.